deem it that it has been approved by the group. And if you do not wish to be on the recording, you will take action as you see fit. Anne Hallisey, is there anything else we should say by way of housekeeping?
No, I think we've got it. You're going to start, right?
Yes, we're going to start now.
Well, you're the boss of this. It's called the
Okay.
Dean's Forum.
It is called the Dean's
I'll
Forum.
wait 2 more minutes and then I would start at that point.
Okay.
Well, okay, I'll do one more, well, just a little introduction to what we're going to do. And I think I'm speaking for like simply 5 minutes at the beginning, and then you're going to start having a conversation with me and I'll make that clear. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then I will leave it to you to guide that and also take it more broadly to conversation or questions from the group. And do you want to speak about how you'd like to receive questions from the group? Because there being over 40 of us now, if everyone tries to talk at once, it'll just be chaos. So there needs to be some kind of system. So Anne, how would you like that to unfold?
Do people know how to raise their hands on Zoom? Do you know how to raise your hand?
So, and the problem you're going to have with that is there's too many people. You can't see them all.
You're right. So how about if you have a question or a comment, you put it in the chat. But Matthew, I'm going to need help with that because I can't manage the chat and the whole conversation at the same time.
So I'm just going to say, I wonder if Chris and Susan might also keep an eye on the chat for us.
Oh, okay.
And help us to see if there are any questions coming up.
Got it.
And is that okay? Or Chris, if you're doing technical, we could ask Susan to look for questions in the chat as they come up.
I can do both, don't worry. And Susan can help. She's a great helper.
You and Susan.
Yes.
So the way this is working is I'm the presenter today, and Anne is going to be, I don't know what the word is. Is it interviewing me? Yes. To get a little further into some of the subject. But the first time we're doing it. So thank you all for coming. And I guess we should dive in. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Chris, do you think we have enough people yet?
Yes, we have 45 and we've not had that. We only had like 3 or 4 come in the last minute. We've got 1 more coming in right now.
Okay. So let me just repeat the housekeeping a little bit. Please keep yourselves on mute. The Dean's Forum is going to be recorded. If you don't wish your face to appear, please turn off your camera, and you won't therefore be recorded. And please put questions in the chat because there's 46 of us now and we can't all speak at once. Anne and Susan and Chris are going to oversee the conversation part when we get to it. So I'm really, let me hit record.
I did already.
Sorry?
I did already.
Oh, you're doing it? Oh, great. So I don't have to worry about it.
Yes.
In that case, welcome everybody to the first Dean's Forum for this year. This is, yay! I'm excited to see you all. I'm excited that so many of you came. And one of the things that's really joyful is seeing everybody's faces. We were debating whether we were going to put this on the live stream at church or do it on Zoom. And I quite like that we're doing it on Zoom because I get to see you all. And that's wonderful. I think it's quite common in a cathedral for there to be a forum from time to time. And I'm exploring, experimenting, trying things out as to how we can best do this at the moment, as we're still under COVID. And coffee hours happening simultaneously, children's chapel is happening simultaneously. But I'm told once upon a time that the cathedral was quite busy at this time of a Sunday morning with many different events going on. And so this is not an unfamiliar idea that a forum might be going on while coffee hour is going on, while some other activity is going on. So we're going to carry on exploring and seeing how that goes. But my theme, which I've chosen for the year, which is an important theme to me, and I want to tell you why I've chosen it, is use your words. This is a phrase that I love and I had never encountered until I moved to America. It's not used in England. But when children are screaming in an incoherent manner that is not understandable to their parents, but they are nevertheless gaining an ability to articulate the feelings behind their scream, I have heard American parents say to their children, use your words. And words are very important. Words can turn that primal scream into a conversation. It can take you from just shouting at each other to an ability to see, recognize, and understand each other. So use your words. I kind of like the idea that there is some energy and power and even fury behind the noise that is created just before you say use your words. Because I think in our culture, many of us are shouting at each other, screaming at each other in an incomprehensible manner. And I wonder if we could use it as consider a spiritual discipline to use our words in a manner which is creative and loving and kind, which is not the same thing as just nice all the time. You can use your words in an argument in a pointed manner, in a direct manner, in a way that makes people feel uncomfortable. You can use difficult words in a loving way. You can use what sound like loving words in a really destructive manner. And I'm interested by all of that. I'm interested as well in the idea of words in liturgy, because we are a liturgical organization. It's how we function. And so I'm really fascinated by the words of liturgy. I'm fascinated by the idea that the words that we use in liturgy spell out what we believe about God. In our Episcopal identity, we really believe that we pray what we believe and we believe what we pray. And so the words that we put into our liturgy are essential to us. Sometimes those words are from the prayer book. Sometimes they're written by a composer, an intercessor. Sometimes they're words from a hymn. Sometimes they're extemporaneous words by a preacher or somebody who's speaking in the service. Sometimes they are words from
Matthew, we just lost you.
Did you lose me for a second?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was saying sometimes that they are contemporary words, sometimes they're experimental words in new liturgies, sometimes they are traditional words from Rite One. All of these words are beautiful. I love words and how they work, and I love to weigh them, and I love to use them, and I love liturgy, and I love trying to use words in liturgy as a way to connect us to each other and connect us to God. So I'm going to speak a little bit about words and the words that I've seen, heard, and appreciated in the life of the cathedral since I've arrived. Other speakers are going to speak about words in the forum in different ways. The next speaker is Mark Oakley. He's going to come next month from St. John's College in Cambridge. He's an old friend and colleague of mine, and he has a particular interest in the idea of religious language as poetic language. But today I want to talk about words at Trinity as I have understood them and appreciated them. But before I do that, I want to share one other thing. It's a poem which speaks to some of what I've been saying. Can everybody see that? Can you just like nod your head at me? There is a problem with this poem. I will acknowledge it. And because we're talking about words, I should name the problem with the words in the poem. It's written in a period in history when ministers were only men. And so it uses masculine language. I could change that, but then that would be me changing the words of a poet. And I don't want to do that. I do like some of what Anne Stevenson is communicating about the nature and the weight of words in this poem, which is why I share it with you. There's also a gendered idea around women making cakes for a funeral. I want to name that and acknowledge it. And I want to say that there is a sort of a gendered slant to that. But what I really think the poet is trying to communicate is that when somebody departs, somebody dies, there are lots of tasks to be done. And these tasks must be taken on by community. And somebody is responsible for the use of words. So I'm going to read it to you. The Minister by Anne Stevenson. We're going to need the minister to help this heavy body into the ground. But he won't dig the hole. Others who are stronger and weaker will have to do that. And he won't wipe his nose and his eyes. Others who are weaker and stronger will have to do that. and he won't bake cakes or take care of the kids, women's work. Anyway, what would they do at a time like this if they didn't do that? No, we'll get the minister to come and take care of the words. He doesn't have to make them up. He doesn't have to say them well. He doesn't have to like them, so long as they agree to obey him. We have to have the minister so the words will know where to go. Imagine them circling and circling the confusing cemetery. Imagine them moving, roving the earth without anywhere to rest. And Stevenson's the minister. I like that because it conjures ideas about words and liturgy, and how liturgy and words can move things on and make things happen. Forgive it for its patriarchal language. It was written a long time ago, before women could be priests. But also critique it for that. Our words do change. Our language does change as time moves forward. We speak of ministers as men and women now, and I love that. And we are thinking also of God in new ways. And we speak of God not in purely male terms, but in expansive terms. And that's an important part of the way in which we use words. I'm going to share something else with you now, and this is where I'm going to invite Anne to start reflecting with us. Here are some of your words. Let me see if I can find it on my screen so I can see. Do you remember this? I love words so much, I was asking you about words when I first arrived. These words are the words that you all gave me in the first month of me being here in the cathedral, when we were having virtual coffees together and conversations. I took them all and I turned them into a word cloud. Do you all know what a word cloud is? It's every time a word is used in the list, it makes the word bigger in the cloud. If the word isn't used, it's a bit smaller. And so I'm sharing this with you because this is the product of the words you gave me when I first arrived at the cathedral. These are the words that you use to describe this cathedral. And I am interested at which words are big and which words are not big and which words are not there. I asked you to give me aspirational words. So, you know, I asked you not to give me the words that you were grumpy about in terms of the cathedral. So those darker words are absent. There are some really positive words here, some beautiful words. There's welcoming and community, caring and love. That's all great. They're the first order words. They're the biggest words on the page. They're the words that we use the most. Sometimes the words that are used the most aren't the most useful words. They're a little bit too thrown around commonplace. I'm interested in this word cloud to dig down into the second order words, because that tells me something of the personality of the cathedral and of who we are. So if I dig down a bit deeper, I can find out that you really value being engaged, being involved in a ministry of healing, being inclusive. Acceptance is important to you. Spirituality is important to you. If I dig down even further, oh my goodness, it's hard to see. Some people, a few people, want the cathedral to be a safe place, an inspirational place, a comforting place, a nourishing place. I've lost Anne now. Anne, are you here on the screen still?
Well, yes, I'm just probably on another page.
I think you're on another page. I will look for you. Anne, I wonder if there's anything you notice about this word cloud.
Well, these are all really, they're words of connection and relationship, and that are really leap out. So family and welcoming and community, home, love, caring, acceptance, inclusion, friendship, compassion, healing. All these words speak to me of relationship, which is certainly at the heart of community, isn't it?
Yeah, There's something I also want to share, which is that I think that there are words that are missing here, which might be the words where we'd like the cathedral to grow, the things it's not so good at. There's also a shadow side to even positive words. And I want to share this, and it's a thought that I've often shared. It's interesting that welcoming and community are the biggest words on that list. I'm just going to hazard a guess that if we ever did this project in any church anywhere, the biggest words on the list would be welcoming and community. And that's because I asked all the people who are here. I didn't ask any of the people that aren't here what they think of the life of the cathedral. So there is a shadow to this positive word of welcome. You've all felt welcomed, and that's why you stayed. And I love that. That's great. It's wonderful. But are there people that didn't feel that way? Are there people that felt that they fell through the cracks, that they didn't feel welcomed? What would I experience if I managed to go and ask all the people that didn't come back for a second time what their words might be? I'm saying that not to make you feel bad. I'm saying that just to say, here is a reality around how we perceive ourselves and how we think of ourselves and where we can grow in relation to words. And do you have any questions about this, or shall I put the other slide up?
Well, didn't you say, Matthew, that you asked when you did this, you asked for words of affirmation?
Yes, aspirational words. Yeah,
Aspiration.
yeah.
So, I wonder if the invitation had even been more neutral than that, what you might have found.
I wonder if anybody else in the Zoom conversation now has an answer to Anne's question. I'm not necessarily asking you to speak for the moment. I'm just asking you to think about it. It's a rhetorical question. What would the words be that you would use where you would wish the cathedral would grow or change or move? Also, how would we use those words? Would we use those words as an accusation? Would we use them as a way of blaming each other? Would we use them as a cause for an argument? Or is there a way of bringing those words together in such a way that it could be a creative conversation that could help us to heal and to grow and to change? And thank you for reminding me of that. Can I put the other slide up?
Yeah.
Okay, I have to stop sharing, move that slide out of the way, find this slide. Technology people, I'm doing it. Can you see this one? This begins to become an interesting exercise because these are not the words that you use to describe the cathedral. These were the words that the diocesan people that I interacted with used to describe the cathedral. I said exactly the same thing to them as I said to you. Please give me 3 aspirational words to describe the cathedral. There are less words in this word cloud because I managed to have a ton more conversations with you. And I loved that, listening to all of you when I first arrived, and I managed to have with members of the diocese, partly because of just how busy I am in cathedral life. But I really do want to reach out beyond the boundaries of the cathedral to talk to people in the wider community. Partly because that's what a cathedral is for. And we might get onto that subject in a bit more depth in a moment. But I really wanted to ask the diocese what they think of the cathedral. So some things I noticed, and then I'm going to ask if there's anything that Anne noticed. Bookstore is really big on this list. Do you know what? Not one of you in the cathedral mentioned the bookstore as a description of the cathedral, but quite a few people from the diocese mentioned the bookstore. And I'm going to say that surprised me. Then lots of these other, well, you actually had an observation when we were talking about this in the week, Anne, about some of the nature of these words. Would you share that too?
Well, I think the bookstore is readily identified with the cathedral because at every major sort of diocesan event like clergy conference and diocesan convention, the bookstore is physically there with their presence, and lots of clergy anyway take advantage of that. It always is a big attraction in the display area.
Yeah.
Certainly of like diocesan convention. So people go to those events and they encounter the bookstore and they think, oh, that's from the cathedral.
Yeah.
The other thing I was noticing about this word cloud is people identifying events that they might have come to the cathedral specifically for, like ordinations, um, and um, oh, acolyte festivals. And I don't see acolyte festival in here, but that's an example that comes to mind.
Well, the second order words have some of that in it as well. And the pilgrimage destination, there's also ordination here, as you've said. There's a lot of language that's trying to spell out that the cathedral is the center of the diocese in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Hub of a wheel,
Hub of a-
center,
Yeah.
and hub is used again. And I think that that's really important because something that we don't think about in cathedral life sometimes is we don't think that we're actually here for other people. Sometimes in cathedral life, we can think to ourselves, this is my church and this is where I go and this is for me. But there is a vocation in cathedral life that we are here for others, that we are not just here for ourselves. So the fact that we are somehow the hub of the wheel, the center, is important. I also want to say that even though I asked people for aspirational words, there were some moments where people couldn't avoid what I would call more challenging words.
Mm.
So can you spot any of those, Anne, or do you want me to go to them?
Well, I see one here called distant yet accessible,
Yes.
and foreign over here.
Foreign, remote,
Old-fashioned.
old-fashioned. Actually, the person that said old-fashioned specified that they meant that in a good way. They kind of liked old-fashioned, and so it was comforting for them. But the word remote is there, the word distant is there. I think far away is somewhere in there. I think that we are a very large geographical diocese, and there are some people right up on the Oregon border that are a part of our diocese. And for them, the cathedral feels very remote.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been wondering about how the cathedral can serve them, even though we are not physically close. And some things I've not really thought through as I'm becoming dean. I'm used to being in the Diocese of California, where most people could get to the cathedral in about an hour at the most, if they needed to come to the center for an activity. When we had the ordination in December, some people that came for a rehearsal and also for the event had to travel hours and hours to get here. And it made me think, oh, I'm going to plan things differently in future, because I planned the rehearsal a week in advance so that we could process it. But that means those people had to make 2 trips for hours and hours and hours. And I've got to think about how to be the dean of a cathedral in a very dispersed diocese, so that how we can serve people who are more remote from us. I'm going to say that even though I think that most of that distance and remote language was about geography, I think some of it is about people's feelings of the cathedral being remote from them. And I'm kind of glad that people in the diocese felt able to say to me as a brand new dean, here are some of my feelings about the cathedral. You asked for my aspirations for the cathedral, but it feels a bit remote to me. And I wonder how we could bridge that gap moving forward as a part of our vocation and ministry. Anything else you spot in here, Anne?
Well, I do want to say, Matthew, that those more critical words like extremely distant, remote, are very much in the minority. Most of this, even at the diocesan level, is very positive.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a real sense of us being a place of celebration, because people often come here for celebrations. And I think it's really nice when we put on a party for the rest of the diocese. And to be able to do that again sometime soon. I'm longing for that. I'm going to stop sharing that now. I'm going to say one more thing, but Anne, if you want to interject at any point and take me in a different direction, do. But let me say one more thing, which is I've also been listening since I've been at the cathedral for words and phrases that have jumped out at me and seemed to stick. And I don't know if you know what the Cathedral mission statement is. Anybody? Can they just say it off the top of their head? Nobody's waving at me. It says, we are a growing community making disciples for Christ and his world. You might be impressed that I memorized that, but I did it just for this meeting. I didn't know what it was before. But I'll tell you what, some parts of that don't resonate with me as much, but some parts of it have come to me from other places. I'm really interested when I hear phrases coming at me from different people. I had a conversation with Dean Emeritus Brown at one point, and the idea of the cathedral making disciples came up in the conversation and in a subsequent letter that he wrote to me, which made me think, oh my goodness, Dean Brown hasn't been here for I don't know how long. But that was in his mind as an important part of the cathedral's identity. And so those words have stuck with me and are working inside me, the cathedral as a place to make disciples. And what does that mean? I will also say that as I walked around, I've noticed some other words. Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with God. I don't know if those words resonate with you or if you know where they come from. But as I walk around the cathedral, even though it's closed down, it feels like I'm doing some archaeology, because the cathedral's closed and the displays aren't live and they're not really happening at the moment. And some of them look now a little bit like the paper displays, that the edge of the words is curling over and it looks like it needs replacing. But there is a place just outside the cathedral office where those words feature. Also, right above Randy Strike's desk, those words feature in a piece of paper that she's taped there. And I had to do some research and find out what that was about. It comes from Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God? And then as I walked around the cathedral, realizing that some of those phrases pop up in different places, I had to ask, where did that come from? And I realized that it was part of an exercise in the past of developing a rule of life that would help members of the cathedral become disciples. And I don't know if that resonates with any of you. But I'm trying to reflect on the deep words in the life of the cathedral, the ones that are foundational, the ones that really make us who we are. And so for me, making disciples, doing justice, loving kindness, and walking humbly with God feel like something that's gone kind of deep. But I don't know if that's true for all of you. It's just something that I'm thinking about our identity. Anne, I'm going to stop and see if you have any specific questions you want to ask me about any of this or any other questions entirely independently.
Well, Matthew, the question that's on my mind that sort of was my first response when you told me about your idea for the Dean's Forum is one I'd like to hear you talk about with the folks that we're gathered with here today. Because you're a new dean, because cathedrals have been around for centuries with different roles, I'd really like to hear you talk about what you think a cathedral is for.
Yeah.
Both for the diocese as well as for the community. Do we have a place in the public square? Do we have a voice?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one question. And then the second one is, in particularly looking at the role of the cathedral in reference to the diocese. As the word cloud showed, it's a lot about people coming to the cathedral. I want to know what you think about the cathedral going out to the diocese.
Yeah.
So those two sort of tensions. What do you think a cathedral is for? For the community that we live in, as well as for the diocese that we share with our brothers and sisters?
I'm going to try and do this without taking too much time so I can keep other questions kind of flowing in a minute. But I have like about a million thoughts about that, and I want to figure out what the most helpful ones are to share. So I'm going to say something by way of introduction that I hope you don't take in the wrong way. but I think some people think of cathedrals as museums. Museums of a time gone by. And I think of that in terms of the art on the walls, spiritual art, the music we play, and the words we use. People think that it's capturing a historic identity. And lots of cathedrals in Europe are hundreds of years old, if not thousands. And so they've got lots of history there and they look like museums. But I want to say that I don't think cathedrals are museums. I think cathedrals are working spaces that are extraordinarily contemporary. And if you want to use a metaphor for what a cathedral should be, I like the idea of laboratory instead of museum. We are often bigger and more resourced than other churches in the wider church. And I think that we can therefore try things. We can experiment. We can try new styles of ministry. There was a whole movement in England, and I think it was over here as well, about having cathedrals providing space for fresh expressions of church, experimental styles of liturgy. And I like that idea. I also think, though, that we are holders of the tradition. So you've got to bridge a gap. We are holders of the tradition, and we are trying to do the worship of our church as excellently as we can, whatever that might be. So to provide excellent manifestations of Episcopal worship is important. But one thing that's important to me is that we provide excellent manifestations of all of the worship of our church, not just one part of it. And our church has developed a whole range of worship resources, including Rite 1, Rite 2, enriching our worship. And I'd like us to make sure that we are providing excellent versions of all of those. So that's one little polarity, the idea of museum or the idea of laboratory. And we could play around with the tension in between that. I also want to talk about things that I've tried to do since I've been here. I am trying to get my head around the cathedral, and I've been saying to people kind of jokingly that because it all shut down because of COVID, and you all are telling me what the cathedral used to be like that I've never seen, it feels like I'm playing chess with invisible pieces. And I can't quite figure out exactly how the cathedral is meant to be. So I'm trying to make sense of that. But at the same time, I also am really keen to try and make sure that the cathedral uses its ability to convene conversations. I don't know if that makes sense to any of you, but again, because we are a larger institution, we can sometimes invite bigger speakers. We can sometimes invite people to use our technical resources to have a conversation, like the Zoom account and our live stream service abilities in the church. I'd like us to use those resources and our size to convene conversations that are meaningful, not just for us, but for also the whole diocese, and also, I hope, for the city outside of the church. Something that Susan Hotchkiss has talked about, and I really love, is that since we've gone online for faith formation activities, we've had people joining us from around the diocese. And that didn't happen before. Nobody from the Oregon border could potentially come to a cathedral activity on a Thursday night before we were forced to create some kind of online space where our education could happen. I really think that our cathedral should be a laboratory for exploring how we can provide resources to the whole diocese using the new technology we've been forced to use because of COVID as an actual benefit to the diocese. That's exciting to me. When COVID ends, dear Lord, please soon, and we're able to regather again, I'm not going to turn the video cameras off. I don't want to do that. Different people have got different philosophies about that. Some people think that if I keep the video cameras on, you'll all want to stay at home in your pajamas, drinking coffee and eating breakfast whilst the service is going on. I believe that you'll all want to come back and regather. But we found that we can reach beyond the geographic area of Sacramento to other states and other countries by having our services online. I think these are all ways of creatively convening conversations. When we were getting to the election, one of the things I wanted to do was to partner with Brave Angels to have conversations about political polarization. And that was an example of me trying to convene a conversation that went beyond just the boundaries of the cathedral's life and the life of the gathered community. It brought in people from the rest of the diocese, and actually some people from other dioceses who happened to see it on my Facebook page, who came and joined us. And so that was an example of convening a conversation. I think the Cathedral is an organization that is here not just for its members, but for people beyond the boundaries of our membership. Our vocation is to serve you as members, but also to be a place that serves the diocese and the city. I'm hoping that this Dean's Forum is another example of convening a conversation. And I hope that some of the presenters are going to be really interesting. If you have ideas about them, let Anne know. Andrew Domek is also helping us with this project. But this is an example of convening a conversation. And did that answer your question? I went on a bit. I should shut up.
No, you shouldn't shut up, but it does occur to me that when I signed up to engage with this conversation, I realized that I have a bias about what a cathedral is and should be doing. And I'm not sure I really tipped my hand to that.
Okay.
I believe a cathedral, an authentic place, that is authentically living into its identity as a cathedral, has a responsibility to be a resource for excellence.
Mm-hmm.
We see that some of that is appearing in the word cloud from the diocese. We see repeatedly reference to the quality of music and liturgy that is done here and has been done for generations. It's not just that you're doing it or previous deans have done it, but people think about, maybe it's because we've had David Link here providing that continuity of excellence in music. But people experience that excellence in music and liturgy also when they come here for events like ordinations and festivals and that sort of thing.
And what do you think about I love the idea, and I think that a cathedral should be a place that strives for excellence. Although I do want to say that if we don't reach perfection, that's okay by me.
Oh, yes.
I like the idea of excellence. What do you think of the tension between the idea of the cathedral being a place of experimentation and the cathedral being a place of excellence? What do you think about the tension between those two ideas?
Well, I'm not sure there should be a tension. I think they kind of go together because in order to pursue excellence, it doesn't mean just staying stuck with the way things have always been done. Part of excellence is creativity, and that means experimentation.
Yeah.
And for the cathedral to be a place that gives itself permission to do that kind of experimentation, and to not make judgments about whether things succeed or fail, because if it doesn't work, that's not so much a failure as information. It tells us something, and we adjust our expectations and our behaviors accordingly.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions, Anna, or should we go to see what people have been saying?
Let's open it up for conversation.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the chat. Susan, do you want to bring us anyone's comments or attention?
I think Tori Beck said something that I think about too, you know, that many people consider the cathedral, the congregation, we consider it our church, our parish, and we're not broadening to think it was the cathedral. So that's just something that Tori Beck thought she wanted to say.
Sorry, say that again, Susan. Tori Beck she doesn't identify the church.
No, she was saying that so many people identify the cathedral as our parish.
Yeah.
You know, rather than it being the cathedral. And I think one of the examples is trying to get the diocese to put our events in their e-news. now they're doing it because we are reaching so many people. But, just saying, oh, that's just a Trinity event. And so just something like, she just had a thought about that. So if you want to comment, I don't know.
I just read bits of Victoria's
Okay.
comment, and Victoria there, and I don't know if you wanted to say anything about this. I hear you. People don't necessarily conceive of Trinity as cathedral, but we are. I think what's the term? The pro-cathedral is the official term of the diocese. Sometimes people think of cathedrals as just a big parish, and we are a big parish in comparison to other parishes in the diocese. So I don't know whether there's a tension or a creative opportunity in understanding ourselves as both parish and cathedral.
Yeah.
And particularly as we have been struggling with COVID, one of the moments of resilience that's really occurred to me is just how far and wide we've reached. And that's been remarkable. And we have a few more resources than other people are able to do. Susan can concentrate on putting activities together on a Thursday night that are diverse, that kind of diversity is not necessarily available to regular parishes that don't have as many people resources. So that's a great gift. I don't know if that responds to Victoria's comment, but I think it's interesting. We're both kind of a parish and cathedral. And I guess, Victoria, do you want to unmute and say anything about that? I can't see where you are, but.
Oh, I'm here.
Hi, Tori.
Hi, I was thinking of it kind of from, there's two sides to it as well. Like, to me, the diocese is something else. The bishop drops in at Christmas and for confirmations. And as far as, there's the convention, and sometimes it's Reading, which is good because then the Northern California people can get there easier. But it's like the closest thing was when we brought in the banners, so that when we did that diocesan cycle of prayer and you set a church and a priest, I thought, well, that's something real. There's a community out there. There's people there. And I'm a very visual person, seeing that banner and knowing that somebody stitched that. I don't know. It resonated with me. Yeah. And
Tori, would you like us to see ourselves more as a cathedral, or do you prefer to see ourselves as a big parish?
I like the idea of the cathedral because I think that gives us a chance to be more far-reaching in what we are trying to achieve in God's world.
Yeah. There is a theologian that has said that the church is the only institution that was ever invented for the benefit of its non-members. And I'm kind of fascinated by that in relation to this cathedral idea. But it's actually theoretically a call to the whole church that we're here to serve and love the world, which we don't always do. We become a bit solipsistic, inward looking sometimes. Thank you, Tori. Susan, I'm going to jump to Kelly's comment. Is that okay? Well, let me just mention Jeannie's on the way. Making disciples is huge, as well as important to give to one of oneself, as well as spreading God's love and help. So thank you, Jeannie. Kelly, I appreciate the discussion about it being okay to try and to fail. It is hard sometimes to have the courage to try something new. And if there is a recognition ahead of trying that failure is okay, and that adaptation can result, I think that's a freeing and helps bolster courage. That's what experimentation is about, I think. I don't know if you know about scientific method, but people have a theory and they try something out, and sometimes it works and sometimes it fails. And that doesn't mean that the experiment was a failure. It means that they just got more data. And I love that. Do any of you know any experiments that have been tried in the life of Trinity Cathedral that have failed? Can any of you think of any of those? Maybe I'll call this a rhetorical question so you don't have to actually answer it out loud. None of that is lost. None of that is unimportant. All of that is learning. And we might try things again. And here's the thing that I never really want to hear. And I'm not going to say this in a grumpy manner. I'm saying this in hopefully a humorous and lighthearted manner. Oh, we tried that before and it didn't work. I'm not interested in that comment. I will love you if you say it to me, but I'm not interested. I don't know why it didn't work. I don't know exactly what didn't work. Did we exactly try the idea? Maybe it wasn't the right time for that idea. Maybe we can try it again. Maybe we should have another go. Maybe we should keep open to it. I think the idea of trying new things is always good and joyful. So anything else anybody wants to pull out from the comments?
Let's see. Okay, there's that. Sorry, just getting down to the comments. Oh, come on.
I'm just spotting Joe Michael's comment.
Oh, okay, good. Thanks.
But keep looking for other ones, Susan.
I will.
Joe Michael's comment is, what does making disciples mean to you all? What can the cathedral do to accomplish that goal? I want to say, oh my goodness, like I said, 19 things about this as well, but I'm going to say just two. One is the reason why we have a mission statement, I think, in the life of the church, is that it's meant to be the thing that inspires us to get up in the morning and get on with things. What do we want to do today? I always look at a mission statement and think to myself, am I inspired to want to get up in the morning and do that? And when I read some mission statements, I think, no, I'm not remotely inspired to stand up, to get up in the morning and do that. Something about making disciples is getting under my skin. I don't exactly know what it means right now. I think that you've talked about it as a cathedral for years, and I would like to keep on exploring it. I think I'd like to get up in the morning and try and do that. And what does that mean? I think it means encouraging people to have a spiritual life. It means encouraging people to actively engage in their community, inspired by their love of God. It might mean having a way of talking amongst ourselves that is kind, compassionate, loving, and healing. It might mean building spiritual disciplines into our lives so that we are able to generate a kind of community that is full of the love of God. Doesn't mean that we won't make mistakes. It might mean that we're committed to recovering from them afterwards. Doesn't mean that we're not going to argue, but it might mean that we're committed to making reconciliation after we have an argument. Might mean that we're committed to forgiveness and to the principles of the life of Jesus. Joe Michael, what do you think? Do you want to unmute and say what you think making a disciple means?
I just did unmute, but hello.
Oh, did you put it in the messages?
No. The whole reason I asked was because I don't know that I know, and I'm very curious about. I want to highlight Liz McClatchy's comment about where the mission statement came from and how it came to be. I wouldn't have known that. I'm sure all y'all didn't know that either. So that was a great little story in there. And yeah, I'm curious about what this mission statement means to folks now, all the parts of it and what you feel might be missing from it.
Mm-hmm. You mean me as the dean or people in the group?
Everybody.
Everybody.
I'm sort of doing unofficial focus grouping or something. I don't know. Just seeing what folks think.
I'd be really fascinated to have people write to us as a vestry, particularly around the annual meeting and before the vestry retreat, which happens right after the annual meeting, because I'm going to ask them to look at the mission statement. Liz McClatchy, it sounds like you were there at the birth of the mission statement. I'm wondering when it happened.
Oh, well, Dean Brown was there. So I'm trying to think of where it was in his tenure, kind of early. If you remember, if anyone remembers the whole church growth movement in our church, it was during that time. Mm-hmm. That we did go to this conference and attended some mega churches and some smaller churches, but and on the way home, we thought about how does this apply to Trinity? and we were all kind of seated fairly close together on the plane. And so we kind of came up with this. And I think an interesting thought is that disciples at that point, we didn't want to just bring people to attend.
Yeah.
We were concerned that, this is so very judgmental, that people were attending some of the churches we visited because of just the music, or that we wanted it to be more serious than that. We wanted our mission to actually bring people closer to Christ. So there was a lot of discussion about that. Just a little funny side note. It was said to bring making disciples for his world, and we said no. We wanted to make that Christ's world, so it's not male or female. So it was certainly in that time frame.
I'm going to interject, Liz, because I'm mindful of time. I'm really appreciative of this, and I'd love to have a longer conversation with you about this.
Perfect.
At some point. I want to say, if a mission works, then years later, you should see its impact. And I'm going to say, I do see impact from this statement in the life of the cathedral. I see people being committed to their spiritual lives and wanting to go deeper. And I see some of the programs we offer being focused around this. The Bishop Megan, has said to me, and to our vestry, a mission statement should help you focus on which activities you should do and not do. You should say to yourself, does this activity fit into our mission statement or not? And if it doesn't, then don't do it, because it's not your mission. And if it does, then do it with all your heart, because it is your mission. And I think some of the Stephen's ministry training, some of the pastoral care activities that we've done, some of the justice ministry that we do, all of those things say to me that here is a community committed to being a disciple. And going back to Joe's comment, I think discipleship is also about following Jesus, very specifically being a disciple of Jesus, and whatever that means. I think it also means having some disciplines. And I think that means disciplines in your spiritual prayer life for yourself personally, and disciplines in the way that we work in community with each other. I think there's lots of wonderful things about Trinity and cathedral life. It's also in a big, potentially bureaucratic institution, because we are of that size, possible that we can get into conflicts, arguments, difficulties, things cannot go right. When we do that, can we manifest our discipleship in the way in which we navigate those things? I'm fascinated by that. I'm just going to read a couple of comments now, though, as I go down. We tried to host a cathedral day for the diocese, but there's little attended. Could that be tried again? Amy Dillon, yes, we absolutely can try that again. Thank you for the spirit of let's try again. But also let's try again with new technology, different advertising, and a variety of ways to meet. Shelley Mydens likes there being worship where there are a number of priests who have different approaches and gifts. I associate that with us being a cathedral for some reason. The reason why that's possible, Shelley, is because we are bigger, we have more people, and retired priests like to come to a cathedral. And so you get lots of different gifts and ideas and styles. Hearing multiple voices is really important. I'd love to figure out how much of a balance you want between my voice and other voices, for instance. I'm the dean and I quite like preaching. You may or may not have noticed. And you might like me preaching, but it was great hearing Anne's voice today. I want to hear Anne's voice. I want to be fed by other people and figure out what the right balance is. Being creative to me means allowing people to practice. I'm struck by the feeling of allowing rebirth to happen. I love that phrase, allowing people to practice. Allowing people to practice. Like, can we practice discipleship until we get it right? And keep trying. I love that. I think it would be interesting to think about how to flow the relationships the other way as well. Is there a way that we could see and hear some of the other churches in the diocese? Wow. Yes, I'm sure there is. Let me tell you one other thing that I've done that you may not have known I've done. I reached out to all the area deans when I arrived as dean of the cathedral and asked if there's any way that we could serve them. Everybody's busy and a bit buried by their strain and stress because of COVID. But a couple of people have reached out to me and asked if I might preach for them. You might notice that I haven't actually really been away from the cathedral much, but because of technology and the way things are working, on a number of occasions, I've recorded a sermon on a Thursday and sent it to a parish in the diocese that they've then used on a Sunday while I've been with you, probably preaching some version of the same sermon with a few different ideas in it for the cathedral to you. So I've preached a bit because of technology for other parishes. I wonder about having other people come and preach for us. That would be fascinating. There are so many comments now, I'm not keeping up.
I have saved the chats, Matthew, so I'll get them to you.
And is there anything that you'd like to draw out from something you spotted, or anything from our conversation you'd like to go back to?
Well, yes, I want to, come back to this notion of what is a cathedral for. And I really deeply appreciate the fact that you have added the offices back in, not, two, three, 4 offices a day. We're not a monastic community, but I do really like that you've added the offices back in, because I think that's part of what a cathedral does. And I love it when we do evensong. I think I mentioned this before, that David McCullough says that one of the greatest gifts of Anglicanism to the world is the tradition of evensong. So I like that you've added the offices back in. I think that's something distinctively that a cathedral can do and do well.
Anne, could you repeat that quote from David McCullough, please? Something blocked you out just for an instant there.
Yes, David McCullough says one of the greatest gifts of Anglicanism to the world is the practice of evensong. It's probably not a direct quote. I'll look it up and let you know what it is. But that notion that it's in our tradition, and really it's quintessentially Anglican. So there's that notion of the offices, and
Can I say something about that, Anne? Because I really like that,
Yeah.
that you picked up on that. I'm mindful that COVID has hit us and impacted us hugely. And I want to say a couple things about that. We weren't sure what to do at the beginning of COVID, and Interim Dean Richardson wanted to make sure that everyone stayed safe. And we drew ourselves in a little bit and started creating online ways of being together. I think what I've been trying to do recently is to say, COVID's with us for a while. Even if we start to regather, it's still going to be with us in some form or another. How can we try and reclaim some of the things that we would be doing anyway in a different way? Mm-hmm. And that's triggered some interesting thoughts for me. One is, there's an awful lot of grief and loss around, and we're beginning to talk about that as a staff. Grief and loss, not just at the lives lost, but at community lost, or hanging out with people being lost, or things that we liked in cathedral life that have been lost because we can't do them anymore. And I have a realization that as we come out of COVID, we might not put everything back together exactly the same as it was before, because we might want to keep some of the things we've learned in this COVID period as we move forward, and we might need to grieve some of the things we've lost. One thing that we've gained that's really interesting is, for the Candlemas Evensong on Tuesday, we had 83 participants. Yeah. I am not sure how many times we've had 83 participants for an Evensong in the middle of the week, right, in the recent history of the cathedral. It was a Tuesday night and 83 people came to Evensong. And I'm like, that was astounding to me, and lovely. And it's because you all got to just like be at home, have a cup of tea, sit down, put the Zoom on and join in. Maybe on Sunday morning, it's nice to stay in your pajamas and have a cup of coffee whilst church comes on. But like, how can we continue to capture some of that gift? And the other thing I wanted to say is, Anne, I was going around looking for words that really struck me, like discipleship and the words from Micah 6:8. Another thing that I've been having a weird feeling about since being at the cathedral, and I don't know exactly what this means just yet, is a feeling of monasticism, even if it's kind of in a reimagined way. And I think it's because there's a quad here, maybe. There's a courtyard outside. And the idea of monks moving through the quad from their place of work to their place of prayer, this being a working place of prayer. I love the Benedictine idea of prayer is work and work is prayer. But we haven't been doing prayer in the cathedral. What's been happening for me is I've been on Zoom having meetings, whether they're pastoral or administrative. And then at 6 o'clock, I've noticed, oh, it's 6 o'clock. It's time for evensong. And I've just stopped what I was doing and logged on. Sometimes I can't, but like most times if I'm free, I'll do it. I've logged on to evensong, and Chris Sanft has been leading evensong on Tuesday. Anne Hallisey has been leading evensong on Monday. We've done a special evensong for a special event. Morning prayer on Fridays. I don't get to that much because it's my Sabbath day. But sometimes I've done it anyway. I'm joined in with Joe and Mary and really loved it. And this prayer punctuation through the week is incredibly monastic. And I don't mean that in a boring, old-fashioned sounding way. I mean that in a kind of a enlivening, life-giving, prayer as breath kind of way that I've really been enjoying. So I don't know what that means, but I see something about the size of the cathedral and the fact that we can provide daily prayer being a real gift.
I
now-
appreciate you saying that, Matthew, because I think that that's part of the charism of cathedral. You know,
Yeah.
cathedrals were in England monastic foundations, and that routine of daily life and prayer, the always going on in some cathedral somewhere is very important, and we step into that by preserving the offices as a cathedral community.
And I'm going to loop back to Joe Michael and what Joe Michael said, which is how do you make disciples? And one of the gifts that we offer you is a daily office. If you would like to deepen your discipleship, one thing you could do is to go to some of the daily offices. And they're all online and you can do it from home. And I think that's really convenient.
Can I say one other thing, and then I'll stop? But when you're talking about making disciples, it immediately put me in mind of how that part of the mission statement for the cathedral is joined to the mission statement for the diocese.
It is.
Created when Barry was bishop, which is making disciples, raising up saints, and transforming communities for Christ. Mm-hmm. So we are alongside the diocese with that notion of discipleship.
I like that. I'm going to draw us to a close because it's now 11:37, and this is meant to be an hour conversation. We've just gone over that slightly. I hope you don't mind. I want to say a couple things by way of summing up, and then Anne, if you have any summing up you want to say, then please do it. Lauren just pointed out to me that the view behind my window, if you look, is changed from the one you will have seen. That is an accessible ramp that's been built during COVID into the back of the cathedral. It's not quite finished. It's got finishing touches to be added to it, but Lauren said, please tell people what that is, and that is what it is. There's also some beautiful artwork in the way the stones have been put together to replicate the beautiful bricklaying in the cathedral building itself. So that's something to bring your attention to. The other is, how has this conversation been? everybody? Would you come again, do you think? I'd like to do this the first Sunday of each month, apart from April, because that's Easter Day, and I don't think I can do this on Easter Day. Next month, March, I've booked a speaker. It's going to be Canon Mark Oakley, who is the Dean of Chapel of Trinity Cathedral and the former...
Not Trinity Cathedral.
No, sorry, this is Trinity Cathedral. My brain's not working. It's the end of a Sunday morning. St. John's College in Cambridge. And he is the former Canon Chancellor of St. Paul's Cathedral in London.
Mm-hmm.
And he was involved there with their public conversation ministries. So the arts and outward facing conversations in the city. But he also has a real interest in the idea of religious language as poetic language, and he will speak to that. And he's also going to preach at our 9 a.m. service. He's going to do that via video from Cambridge in England live, because we have the technology to do that. And I think in me saying that, it's probably going to make Chris slightly nervous, because Chris has to help deliver the technical side of that. But that's what our intention is. Worst case scenario, he'll pre-record a video and send it to us that will drop into the service. But we're hoping he's going to be live by satellite from the UK. And then, Chris?
I think I'm on vacation that day.
I don't think you are. And so join me for that conversation. Also, Anne is helping me in putting together this program with Andy Domek from our vestry. And we are looking at other speakers for the rest of the year, but we haven't nailed them all down yet. And so if anybody has suggestions, then please let me know. I'm hoping that the speakers will be in line with the theme around use your words in a whole variety of different ways. So that's going to be how this unfolds. You can also email me after this and let me know how this went. I'd be delighted, and we will figure out how to put the recording out so that other people can watch it later. It will probably be on our Vimeo account at some point once we've checked in on it. And Hallisey, anything more you want to say?
No, except thank you all for coming and for your attentiveness and engagement through the chat function. I really appreciate it. It's a rich conversation, and I look forward to it continuing.
This is great. Make sure you come along to the annual meeting. It will be different from this.